Hi and welcome to another episode of The Grind. My name is Violet Njaki and today things are a little bit different. Today you're going to understand as an economy, as business people, with all the changes that are taking place, from the rise in the excise duty, from the removal of the subsidies, what does this mean for us as a country, as an economy, and even as business people? And that is why we saw it fit to sit with a couple of economists to understand. They can maybe give us in layman's language, give us an understanding of what is happening and how to go through these economic times. In my far right, I have Johnson Derry, he's an economist, and also I have Lewis Matanga, who's also an economist. But before we go on, I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Maybe sijawa introduce when you wanafanya mtu anafeel nimeachilia kitu, so I'm going to just give them a minute or so just to tell us who they are and what we expect today. Johnson.
Yeah, so my name is Johnson Derry. I'm an economic and financial analyst. I work for ABC Capital as a manager in charge of corporate finance and advisory, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you, Johnson. Lewis.
Yeah, my name is Lewis Maganga. I'm an economic researcher with the Progressive African Library and Information Activist Group. I'm really proud to be here today and looking forward to the discussions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So off to our discussion today. I'll go with the latest news, Johnson. There's an increase of 6.3% by the KRA on all for the excise duty. What does this mean for business people who deal with these goods that have been imposed on this rise?
So the most likely thing we're going to see from as a consequence of that is actually you're going to see one of two things. Either the businesses that can afford to absorb this will absorb this and they will see erosion of margins, or they will try and pass on this cost to the consumer and likely see destruction of demand. Either way, they're not happy. Either lower revenues or lower profits, or both at the same time. So that's I think that's from a macro view, that's the expectations we have.
And do you think, Lewis, that most businesses in the country, the way we are structured, do you think that we can survive this increase?
Well, the likely scenario, of course, is an increase in the prices of the end products. So the consumers would be the ones expected to bear this increase in prices. Naturally, this would lead to a decrease in demand because times are tough. And, in literally almost all goods that the households are having to consume are experiencing increasing prices. So it's really going to be a difficult time for the consumers mostly, and the producers are definitely going to experience difficulties as well because people are not going to be able to access the products that they're producing. Yeah.
So even with the increased tax, there's the issue of the subsidy. We've been enjoying the subsidy from the government for quite some months now, but the president right now, William Ruto, just came in and decided, you know what, the subsidy is out. And for a layman language, Lewis, could you please explain to us what does that mean for you as the consumer, that the subsidy has been removed?
The removal of the subsidy, of course, naturally translates to an increase in the prices of fuel. And I'm sure many Kenyans already are starting to experience an increase in the prices of transport. If you're using public transport, then of course, definitely you see that the prices are high. But also for a government that wants really to lower the costs of production, the removal of the subsidy presents certain problems because even the producers had been enjoying that subsidy because that means that the cost of doing business in terms of procuring energy that's needed for production was lower. So the consumers are likely to see a multiplied effect, an increase in prices not only of direct transportation, public transportation or private transportation, but also on other goods that also depend on transportation for them to get to the market. So there's really going to be an increase in prices in several commodities as a result.
Wow, okay. So now we've talked about the current economic repercussions that you're facing because of the 6.3% increase in the tax and the fuel subsidy. But when we also talk about the current regime in government that we have right now, the UDA, or rather let me say President William Ruto, had a manifesto that was touching a lot on business. When he was talking about it, he talked about the Hustler Fund. Lewis, with the Hustler Fund, when we say the Hustler Fund, does it just mean that I, as a youth, I can go pop up at UDA offices and say, I'm here to apply for this Hustler Fund and this is what I want to do?
Well, of course not. Hustler Fund was meant to benefit small-scale businesses, to target mostly actually people in the informal sector. So you would have, people in the Juakali sector who've been conducting small businesses, which actually employs 80%, over 80% of the people who are in employment in Kenya. So the people who have existing businesses are the ones who can expect to benefit from the Hustler Fund. Of course, those who are yet to have registered businesses or those who are yet to have going concerns, of course, can take advantage by now, beginning such. But I feel the ones who've been up and running would be the ones who would benefit more from the Hustler Fund. I think it's, well, definitely the plan is to have, as much funding as possible for these small-scale businesses so that they can boost, so that economic growth can be boosted right from the bottom to the top. Well, it's only time will tell. We can, we shall have to see how much this is going to affect, of course, the economy.
So, Johnson, from an economist's point of view, do you think that this is something achievable, that the Hustler Fund is something that can benefit the youths that we have in business in Juakali, as you said, like 80% of the business people are Juakali? Do you think that this is a fund that can actually come into existence and that can help benefit the business people?
I struggle to see how they're going to do it. Even before I get to the operationalization of the facility, do they even have the money to do that? Yeah. So from the get-go, right now the primary problem is you're experiencing rising interest rates within the economy. Then you're also experiencing tightening monetary policy globally, right? So the Fed is raising rates. ECB is raising rates, so this is sucking out money from all economies at the same time. So our traditional sources of funding, like say for example from FDI, may or may not be affected. We don't know, but likely we should expect it will be. So when you're having less investment coming in, the economy is also struggling as it was from the beginning. You're already having too much debt. The debt service issues are a concern. So the question is, what are the priorities then? Right. So my sense is, before we start talking about the Hustler Fund, we'll have to resolve the fiscal mess we are in. I'm told some counties have not gotten any money, maybe the last 3 months or so. We also, the government's finances.
Apparently, our coffers are empty.
You saw the numbers, right? And debt service is obviously the number one concern every month for this government. The bond auctions are raising half of what the targets are. So how much of that, so I mean, is there any new borrowing? Because there's new borrowing and then there's refinancing of existing money. So are you even getting any new borrowing? Because when you refinance, what you're essentially doing is you're raising new money to pay off this money. So you'll have nothing at the end. So you need to refinance. Are you able to refinance? So I think the number one concern right now is just funding government, period. Before even you start putting up funds of this, that, or the other, of which, of course, if they're able to secure the resources, and maybe they can through partnerships with the likes of World Bank, they can do that. But then after that, they will need to put up measures to mitigate the risks that have befallen similar funds, the Women's Fund, Youth Fund, historically.
So, and even when we were talking about the business, Nairobi County's Governor Sakaja said introduced a one license law that a business, if you an enterprise, if you're applying, you get just one license. And in the manifesto, they're saying about 50 urban residents can one street trading premise for 50 urban residents, if I may quote. We will work with county governments to provide one street trading premise. Is that the same thing as what Sakaja wants to input of one license for per premises for you to go on with your business? Or what does the 50 urban mean?
Well, we can see the similarity. What Sakaja, is planning to do is to remove many of the hindrances that were there in terms of setting up businesses, small-scale businesses, particularly in the informal sector, to just remove them and enable many people in the informal sector, many people who are young, who want to get into the informal sector as a solution to the unemployment crisis, to get into that sector as easily as possible. So we can see the similarity. Of course, it's really about creating that enabling environment for them to be able to do their businesses. Of course, again, only time will tell how this is going to work. So, we really have to look forward to seeing how this is going to work.
Oh, wow. Well, Johnson and Lewis, you have quite the insight on the UDA's manifesto and how they're bringing it to life. Since now they're in government, we need to see, did they play with our minds, or this is something that is quite achievable? We are going to take a short break, but we'll be right back to understand more of this and more.
You are watching TV 47. Disability is not only limited to physical disorder, but also mental issue. From depression,
I was under depression for like 2 years.
bipolar,
Bipolar disorder is a mood disorder.
and even suicidal thoughts.
When I was just about to hang myself, a certain voice just talked to me, and I believe that was God. I tried suicide more than 6 times.
Beyond the Limit has gone beyond its limit to find answers so as to help everyone go through life with ease. Join Mudhoni Maina every Saturday at 7:30 p.m. Starting this September at 8:30 p.m. on Tuesday, The Realtor brings it all to perspective. We identify a property, discuss and demonstrate the journey towards ownership.
Professionals who have integrity, and from their
Johnson Derry and Lewis Maganga, and we are talking about the economy and also UDA's manifesto when it touches the economy. But before we continue, we're going to get our business quote of the day.
Change the changeable, accept the unchangeable, and remove yourself from the unacceptable. Dennis Waitley.
So before, when we were on a break, I was talking to Johnson and Lewis, trying to understand. In UDA's manifesto, they talked about 4% a month tax in regulatory compliance. You were explaining to us what does this mean?
So I'll start from the basics, right? So when in any economy, you've got your tax laws, and for purposes of compliance, you will need. So for some economies, the tax laws are so complex, you need to hire in some cases an army of lawyers and tax analysts and accountants to just understand and process what you need to pay, manage your taxes as well, because taxes are costs. Just like any cost, you need to keep them low, things like that. So it costs resources. Now, and this is a thought that you'll hear a lot with Republicans. They say, when you have complex tax laws, people and companies are forced to allocate too much resources towards those, compliance, and as a consequence, it becomes an unnecessary burden to the economy. Because if every company is doing that, then those are resources you could be paying scientists, you could be paying salespeople that you are now reallocating towards compliance, and it's a unnecessary expenditure, as it were. So, but that's usually a consequence of the laws, right? The idea then is to make it simpler so that you don't need as many resources, as much resources towards compliance. But as I was telling you earlier, what that means is then, some of this complexity arises as a result of trying to accommodate some special requests or, issues in the economy or within an industry, within a sector, because how people do business is different from company to company. Now, as a consequence, when you, in removal of that complexity, the tax burden may actually increase on these other guys. So it makes sometimes it's not a zero-sum game. Sometimes it's even worse than that. So it's an interesting concept. I'd like to see how they implement it and how they accommodate these other special interests.
Okay, and Lewis, we are at 16% taxation as a country, and that compared to other countries is a bit high. Maybe for some African countries we are low, but generally people say that 16% is quite high. Is it that the government should reconsider that for businesses to survive, considering how the economy is going, we may need a reduction in tax?
Yes, precisely. Precisely that. When we say we want to lower the cost of production, taxation is part of the costs. So increasing taxation in the businesses that are running in the economy, some guys would put it, is the same as pouring water in a bucket and trying to and you're in the bucket and you're trying to lift the bucket while you're inside, right? So the end goal should be to facilitate businesses to lower their own costs of production, so that at the end of the day the households have their costs of consumer goods as low as possible. So yes, the end goal should be that the government reduces taxes so that the consumer, the household, accesses commodities at the lowest rate possible.
So, and also in their manifesto they had something about the MSMEs, and they were saying that they want to build a development center, for a business development center in every ward. Is this something that is achievable, and what does it mean for businesses if something like this comes to term?
It's a tough question. My view is business will go where business is required. It doesn't. We don't set up business here because we've got regulatory support here. I want to be where my customers are. Unless the government is my customer, I want to be where my customers are. I want to be able to sell. I want to set up my business in a way that is the most efficient way possible, so that my inputs and outputs, I can do it at the lowest cost possible, at the quickest time possible. I need to turn over my investment as frequently as possible to generate as much as possible. So that's what it is. The idea that you can do that everywhere for me, it doesn't make sense. From county to county, different needs, different requirements. Some businesses can be done from home, some businesses require premises, some manufacturing will require premises, but it also needs to be close to a logistical hub. It's not for politicians to say where business will be set up. I think that's for the entrepreneurs themselves, who have a pretty good idea how best they will be able to serve the society.
And even with the ideas of this building, the Business Development Center, he talked about having business people join circles or put them in circles. Is this an ideal idea for people in business?
Well, coming to circles for entrepreneurs, for small-scale producers, would of course mean that you're trying to pull resources together, so that you can have a greater pool of investment, and naturally this would yield better results for anyone who's in business, because of course you'd benefit from the large economies of scale. So I think the decision should be by the entrepreneurs themselves. Well, of course you can encourage them to pull their resources together, to come together in circles. But I think they themselves can assess the benefits of coming together, of pulling resources together, and they can see how best that would affect their own businesses and how best they can benefit from large economies of scale.
And also with that, they were talking about the having incubation centers in TVET institutions. I believe there's something like Kenya Polytechnic and that. Is that a way forward that in having these incubation centers, it means that our young people who are in these institutions, they get to have the experience or rather get knowledge on how to run businesses?
Yes, and of course the initial setup will be unlikely be perfect. Perfection can be achieved over time. But for me, the most interesting thing about that idea isn't even for the young guy who's leaving school. It is just generally speaking how academia will relate with business after that. Because when academia gets involved in business, anybody who gets involved in business usually changes their perspective on how things ought to run pretty quickly.
Yes.
Yeah. So yes, you'll be set. You'll if you can set it up in a way that they get the facilities they need to do business. But remember, they don't have the money. So how do you finance that as well? It'll be interesting to understand that. But what is most important for me or curious for me is how government and academia will respond to the various challenges and whether it will help them see things a little differently. I think that's where I would like to see how this experiment moves forward.
You're keen to see what is it that you will do for this aspect?
Or no, not just what they'll do, but how it will change them, right? When you're in school and you just say, you've got all the knowledge you've had, now you go do it. It's
out
one
and
thing.
Conquer.
Yeah, because you've really essentially washed your hands off. But when this guy is here and he's putting your theories that you taught him in class to test.
Yes.
And then there's feedback from the market, right? So ideally you ought to learn as a consequence. Also, you'll need to fund these guys because yes, he's going to sit there on a desk and he's got this idea he wants to put together, but then how are you going to facilitate him? Suppose it needs working capital, suppose it needs, who's going to fund that and whatnot. But even in that entire exercise, the financier, the educator, the mix is actually very interesting. I suspect they'll become better teachers, better, the entire enterprise, the schooling system, the thinking that goes in there will change completely. And that's what is more interesting for me.
They say that is how education was before we actually came into kufunzwa woodwork, kufunzwa carpentry hapo vizuri and metalwork. So Lewis, as we wind up, what advice would you have for business people and entrepreneurs on how to survive the economic times that you're facing right now? And do we hope of finding survival maybe in 3 months we go back to normal, or how do we survive these times?
Well, these are difficult times, really, because the issues are not only in Kenya, but global. You can see that the rise in prices of petroleum, of basic commodities, of factors of production cut across. And the role of government is to step in and to intervene where there is market failure or where there is difficulty, and to try and assist so that the economy is resuscitated, so that people don't really get to feel the negative impacts as much, so that we can just survive throughout this period.
Yeah.
I think one thing that we are yet to see is the plan that the government has on ensuring that the end consumer gets to experience a lowered prices in basic commodities comprehensively.
Yeah.
There's all these ideas coming around. Of course, there's the questions of how to fund all these ideas, how to make all these SMEs work, how to avail funding to them, all that hustler fund and all that. But remember that Article 43 of the Constitution of Kenya talks about the right to food for all Kenyans, talks about the right to housing, the right to education. So that requires government intervention, because you can't leave all these things to market forces.
Yes, true.
So we're yet to see how the government is going to act and ensure that actually the end consumer gets to enjoy all these things.
Yes.
So yes, these are things that we should really look out for and watch out for.
Yeah, and Johnson, what is your advice for someone who's just starting a business during these times that are quite hard, but they have the hopes of survival? What is the advice to them that they can take through to help them survive these times?
My sense is there's no one coming to save us but ourselves.
Tuko peke yetu.
Yeah, on your own. I mean, the government itself needs help. So who's going to help who? So my view is there's a word in Japanese called kaizen, and it means continuous improvement. And I'd advise the Kenyan entrepreneur to adopt that philosophy because when you're continuously improving yourself, you'll find naturally you'll survive.
Yeah.
Naturally, yeah. So that's that. I would leave it at that. Just kaizen.
Well, guys, that is all we had for you here today. An insightful conversation with Johnson Derry, who is an economist, and Lewis Maganga, also an economist. And I hope that you've